So apparently 10 rounds is the number that keeps us safe. Not 11, not 9, not 8, 10. That's the magic number politicians decided suddenly makes a firearm too dangerous. But a court in Washington, D.C. just looked at that logic and said, yeah, no, that's unconstitutional as fuck.
D.C.'s Court of Appeals rules the district's ban on some firearm magazines violates the Second Amendment. Specifically, the law says you cannot have a magazine that holds more than 10 rounds of ammunition. That law took effect in 2008. A man sued the district over the law when he was arrested with an unregistered semi-automatic gun with a 30-round magazine.
The judge writing these magazines are ubiquitous in our country, numbering in the hundreds of millions, and because of that, the law banning them outright violates the Second Amendment.
Now, that word right there matters, ubiquitous, because the Constitution protects arms that are in common use by law-abiding citizens. And that's exactly what the court pointed out. Magazines holding more than 10 rounds are arms in common and ubiquitous use. And under the Supreme Court's Bruen decision, if the government wants to ban something related to firearms, they have to show a historical tradition of banning it, which the court addressed directly. The D.C. ban could not survive the scrutiny of the Supreme Court's Bruen ruling, as there is no history of tradition of banning said magazines. In other words, there's no historical precedent for banning these magazines, like absolutely none, which means the law collapses under its own weight. Now, of course, there was a dissent, and the dissent said something we've all heard before. 30-round magazines are particularly lethal and not in common use for defense. I got a whole box of them hoes right here. Right here, 30 rounds, what are we talking about? But here's the problem with that argument. It assumes the government gets to decide how capable you're allowed to be when defending your own life. And that's where this entire conversation starts to fall apart, because it all comes down to a number, 10. Why 10? Why not 11? Why not 9? Why not 8? Why not 7? Why not 5? Because those numbers are completely arbitrary. They're just making shit up. And honestly, that's why magazine limits irritate the hell out of me. Because when it comes to carrying a firearm for self-defense, one of the biggest things I care about is capacity. I've said it before and I'll say it again, I'm a capacity whore. If I'm carrying a gun to defend myself, I want as many rounds in that gun as I can reasonably carry. But there's always a trade-off. More rounds usually means a bigger gun, and a bigger gun is harder to conceal, which is why when I'm carrying something like a 2011 and I want to keep the gun flush so I can minimize the footprint, I run magazines like this. I'll take this Springfield Prodigy Compact. See? The flush magazine, the one standard magazine that comes with it, as you see here, comes with 17 rounds. But with this Checkmate magazine, I can run 19 rounds flush. Same footprint, but now I've got 2 extra rounds in the gun. And these magazines are made by Checkmate, which also happens to be the sponsor of today's video. If you run 2011 style guns like Staccato, Kimber, or Springfield Prodigies, Checkmate makes magazines specifically for those platforms. They're American made and they're extremely well built and designed to maximize capacity without increasing the size of the gun. Now, officially, they call this a 19-round magazine. But I'll just say this, I've personally been able to squeeze 20 rounds in there and still run the gun. But they'll say officially it's 19 rounds. I'll leave it at that. But the point is this, you get more capacity without increasing the footprint of the gun. And if you're like me and capacity matters when it comes to firearms you carry, that's a pretty big deal. So if you run a 2011 platform and want to maximize capacity without increasing the footprint, go check out Checkmate magazines and support the companies that support the channel. Thanks again, Checkmate, for sponsoring this video. Now, the reason I care about squeezing every round I can into a magazine like that is because politicians keep trying to do the exact opposite. They keep trying to decide how many rounds you're allowed to have, and we've actually seen them try to move that number before. Listen to this.
We are now less than a week away from the legislative session, and a bill being proposed is focusing on banning large-capacity gun magazines.
In the upcoming 60-day session, Democrat State Representative Patricia Roybal Caballero will introduce House Bill 50, which aims to ban large-capacity magazines in New Mexico. A large-capacity magazine holds 10 or more rounds.
9 rounds. That's the line they drew. But the moment you accept 10 as the limit, they start lowering it. Start at 10, then go to 9, and 8, 7, then 5, because the real goal has never been about magazines. It's about restricting firearms piece by piece. And the lower that number goes, the more guns effectively disappear from the market, because most modern handguns already come standard with magazines holding more than 10 rounds. So when you lower the number, you're not regulating magazines, you're limiting guns. But here's the bigger issue people ignore. Self-defense isn't predictable. You don't know if there's one attacker, you don't know if there's a 3 attacker, you don't know if you're going to miss. And under stress, most people miss, because most people carrying a firearm for self-defense are not expert marksmen. They're normal people, which means capacity doesn't make someone more dangerous. It gives them more opportunity to survive. And that's really what this entire debate comes down to, a fighting chance. Because criminals don't limit themselves to 10 rounds. They don't follow magazine bans. The only people who follow those laws are the people who obey the law in the first place, which means magazine bans don't disarm criminals, they disarm the people criminals attack. So the real question isn't whether a magazine holds 10 rounds or 15 rounds or 20 rounds. The real question is this: should the government be allowed to arbitrarily decide how capable you are allowed to be when defending your own life? Because that's what magazine bans actually do. They decide how much of a fighting chance you get. And that's exactly why courts keep striking these laws down. Because the Second Amendment doesn't say the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed unless the magazines hold more than 10 rounds. It doesn't say unless politicians think that number is too scary. The Second Amendment says the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed, period. And if those arms are commonly owned by millions of Americans, then banning them isn't just bad policy, it's unconstitutional. And if you're still here, don't forget to also check out my favorite wireless Bluetooth in-ear hearing protection, the AKT1 Blackouts. I call them the AirPods for shooters because they let you listen to music while also letting you hear your surroundings, enhance your hearing by 6 times, and have active noise blocking, and you can take phone calls while you're at the range shooting. So hit the link in the description section and check out the wireless Bluetooth hearing protection that I absolutely love whenever I go to the range, the AKT1 Blackouts. One thing's for certain and 2 things are for sure. Politicians and tech giants don't want gun content to be recommended to you. And we're all fighting this culture war together. Now, you can help do your part by liking, commenting, subscribing to the channel, but most importantly, sharing this video with at least one person. Together, we can stop the suppression of our 2A rights. And don't forget to click the link in the description section of this video for the products that I mentioned in this video.